So thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Lisa Morse. I'm a program coordinator at Literacy Pittsburgh. I've been working in the uh, Shadyside Pittsburgh East office for the last 7 years. Um, and prior to that, I was a K through 12 certified English and English as a second language teacher. Um, what I'm bringing to you tonight is I'm bringing because we've had these prior presentations on culturally responsive teaching in the brain, and they touched on the importance of effective feedback. We found tutors had some questions about what makes feedback effective, and we wanted to try to provide a place to discuss that. I found a resource that I'm going to share with you if I can do things properly. So this is the book that I found, How to Give Effective Feedback to Your Students by Susan M. Brookhart. This book is from 2017 and it was written for K through 12 teachers. So it includes a lot of information that isn't necessarily of interest to you as individual tutors with adults, but there is a lot of good stuff here too, and that's what I'm going to try and pass on to you. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions if you have any at any point. My only request is that if you want to ask a specific question about a student, please don't use their name because this is going to be saved to YouTube and we want to protect their privacy. So before we start, let's talk a little bit about what feedback is. Feedback is information based on specific work, information about how a learner is doing relative to a particular goal, and information that helps the learner know what to do next. Good feedback addresses both cognitive and motivational factors at the same time. We need to recognize that any message that's given to a student is filtered through their perception to become the message they receive. Their job is to make meaning of the work they're given, not to respond to stimuli. When I first entered this profession, we were still talking to some degree about providing students with stimulus so that they would respond appropriately. That's no longer the view that most educators have of their job as teachers. There are lots of ways that we can present material and it won't be accepted by students. So the goal is to present it so that they can understand it and use it to change what they're doing. We can't make learners focus on or learn something. We provide feedback that helps them decide where they are in response to their own goals and what they want to tackle next. So if that's what feedback is, what isn't it? It isn't really advice on what to do or not to do, and it's not evaluation of the person. It's not really good job, bad job. It's not, oh, you're so smart. It's talking about specific things that are being done. And the advice you might give some advice about possible ways to approach problems, but you wouldn't say that, I think you ought to. That's what we want to stay away from. So there are a number of categories of feedback. There's feedback about the task. For instance, the answers are right or wrong, or directions to help students get more information. There's feedback about the processing of the task. For instance, the strategies they used or that they could be used. There's feedback about self-regulation or self-evaluation and self-confidence. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Feedback, there's also feedback about the learner as a person, and we're going to try to stay away from that last type of feedback. It's important to understand that feedback is really the essence of teaching. It's part of the formative learning cycle, and good feedback allows the learner to think about these questions. Where am I going? Where am I now? How do I close the gap? How do I get to where I'm going? What do I have to do next? And it involves comments followed by more practice. So if we want to look at this as a feedback, a cycle, you can see we start with this I do. I know we've trained you in I do. So as a teacher, I'm going to explain something. I'm going to model it. And then I'm going to give them a chance to practice it. That's the we do. And then we're going to have them show us that they understand, the you do, right? And then we're going to give them feedback on their performance. Hopefully, because of this feedback, they'll do better the next time they do the same or similar work. That improved performance then goes on and takes us to the next step of what we're going to model and explain. Now, sometimes we have to go back and re-explain something we've already explained. That's not a bad thing. What we want to try to do is to find a more effective way, or a way that the student can hear better, understand better, to model and explain something a second time if that's necessary. So in between each I do, we do, you do cycle, we're checking in with them to see, do they really understand what it is they're doing and why it is they're doing it? So there are 3 ways, according to this author, to look at feedback. The first is to look at the micro view, to look at the message itself, to analyze what we say and how it's delivered. The next is what she calls the snapshot view, which is to look at the feedback as an episode of learning. What did the teacher learn? What did the learner learn? It's part of the reason that we have on our weekly reports that box that you can fill in to give us a little bit of information. That's a good place for you to just sort of say, oh, they understood how to, I'm not a math person. I was going to use a math example, bad idea. They understand what is involved in a complete sentence. I can tell that. Sorry, I moved this, didn't I? No, I didn't. This is where I am. I can tell that they know what a full sentence is. They've learned the parts of a sentence, but they're still not necessarily creating complete sentences. And then the long view is to look at the result of the feedback. Did the learner use the feedback, and did the learning improve? So she has written a guide that she has included that gives you lots of pieces to look at in each of these views. So the micro view allows you to evaluate the feedback. Is the feedback descriptive? Is it timely? Does it contain the right amount of information, neither too much nor too little? Does it compare the work to criteria? Does it focus on the work? Does it focus on the process? Is it positive? Is it clear to the learner? Is it specific? Does its tone imply the learner is active? The snapshot view, we're asking, what evidence of learning does the feedback provide? What did the learner learn from the feedback? And what did the teacher learn from the feedback? And then the longer view looks at the next steps that the teacher and the learner ought to take in order to continue to learn, right? And then did they take those steps, and did learning improve? So notice that we're not focusing on grades or getting answers correct. Research over the years has mostly shown that descriptive comment and how the student experiences the comments either as information or as judgment, show that descriptive comments that deal with a specific task affect both performance and motivation and foster interest in learning for its own sake. So we're going to look at all the various, this is a lot of information. I'm hoping to sort of roll through it. And then I do have some examples of feedback that I want to share with you, some student work we can look at, and then the feedback that goes along with it so that we get a sense of what that looks like. So I said that feedback can vary in timing, when it's given and how often. It can vary in amount, how many points are made, how much is said about each point, and whether it's the mode, whether it's oral, written, or visual, or a demonstration. And for us, working one-on-one with adults, there are specific ways that we would do this. Most of what we're going to give in terms of feedback is fairly immediate, with the exception of perhaps writing paragraphs. That's going to be a sort of a longer turnaround time. We delay feedback, this says, for more comprehensive reviews of learner thinking and processing. So if you're going to review math with a student, every now and then you're going to give sort of group or exercises in a group of things, a bunch of problems that are different to see if they can cope with different problems at one time. And then after that, you would give them feedback on how they're doing on all of those problems. She does say that it's really important not to delay feedback beyond when it would make a difference to the learner. So I'm sure we've all had teachers who returned things to us weeks after we've done them, by which time we've forgotten what it was that we did or why it was important. That isn't what we want for our students, because we want them to see the feedback or to hear about the feedback while they still kind of remember what it was they were thinking about when they did the work itself. And we want to provide feedback as often as it's practical. We want to prioritize the most important pieces of information for them and choose points that relate to major learning goals. We want to consider their developmental level. So for this middle point, to choose points that relate to major learning goals, think about someone who turns in a writing assignment and gets it back and it's covered with red ink. I don't think any of our tutors do this, but I have seen this in other places where, you know, every small mistake is corrected. That doesn't necessarily help a student learn which ones of these are most important, and it doesn't help them figure out how to make corrections on their own. So we want to help them move to writing more correctly, as opposed to being able to correct all of the mistakes that they've made in something. Generally, we are going to use oral feedback for almost everything. Occasionally, we'll do written feedback. If a student is doing a math problem incorrectly, it's quite likely that you'll demonstrate for them how to do that particular type of math problem. That's what they mean by a visual or a demonstration mode. As a student gets stronger, you're going to give them less feedback, so they are doing more of the work themselves. If you're doing a drill on grammar or pronunciation, then immediate correction is going to be important. But constant correction is never something we advocate. If a learner wants to improve something like oral reading fluency, it's not necessary for them to correctly articulate every word on the page. If they have a particular accent, let it go unless it impedes their comprehension or your comprehension of them. If they're writing, not every error needs to be fixed. focus on a type of error or a few types of error at a time. Feedback should always give students a clear understanding of what to do next on one or several points that they can see they need to work on. So she talks about different types of feedback content. And I hope that everybody can see this. It's not as large as I would like it to be on my screen, but I do have it in a Google Doc, which you should be able to open. Let me just see if I can copy it. Copy. I'm going to put the link for the Google Doc in the chat in case you'd like it. And if someone would try to click on that link and see if it will open for you. I hope it does. I hope I did that right. Let us know if that doesn't work for you and I'll have to fiddle with the settings on it. So feedback content can vary in focus. In other words, you can focus on the work or on the process or on the way the student is behaving. Hi, Evelyn. Did you want to tell me something? Or you just turned yourself off?
No, I was just turning myself off.
Okay, fine. It's nice to see a person. I figure people are there, but it's nice to see you. So we're going to talk about self-regulation. One of the things, I have a tutor who has a student who is terrifically apprehensive about testing. They're working primarily on math. Her reading and writing is coming along, but her math is really emotionally laden for her. So whenever the tutor was giving her math problems, she would get all worked up about being able to do them. And we talked about how can we lower the feelings associated with the math so that she can focus on the work and not on how she feels about the work. And so we have some ideas. One way was to give her a few problems every day and track how she's doing with those problems. And she is now able to see that she doesn't get every single problem wrong. She is getting better at math, and she can work on it for slightly longer periods of time than she was able to even a couple of months ago. So the self-regulation there was really important to get past for her. So whenever possible, we want to try to describe both the work and the process and the relationship. We want to comment on learners' self-regulation if that's going to help them become help it become easier for them to regulate themselves. We want to compare what they're doing to good work, right? That's criterion referenced. We don't want to compare them to how our last student did. We may sometimes want to compare how they're doing today with how they did in the past, right? That can be useful information, especially if it helps them build their self-esteem and recognize that they are making improvement when they think they aren't. We want to help them see that they are moving towards the goal that they've set. We want the function is to be descriptive, not to be evaluative or judgmental. We want to describe strengths and weaknesses and observations. We want to be as positive as possible when we describe what's done. And when we do have negative descriptions, we need to also try to give positive suggestions for improvement. And I have some specific examples of that later on we'll look at. When it's negative, do your best to offer constructive criticism, suggestions for how to do the work better. When we give feedback, we need to make sure that the learner understands the words we're using. I'm trying to be careful when I'm speaking with you so that I'm not using too many too much educational jargon. I have that background. I know that that is not always clear to people who don't have that background. So I'm trying to stay away from it. When I slip into it, call me on it, please. I don't do it on purpose. It's just sometimes a shortcut for me to use some of those terms. You want to tailor the amount and content of the feedback you're giving to the learner's developmental level. How specific do you want to be? Well, it's the Goldilocks principle, right? You don't want to be too specific, too nitpicky. You don't want to be too general. You want to give them just the right amount of feedback. It should be specific enough so the learner knows what to do, but not so specific that you've done all the work for them. So if we go back to writing a paragraph where you've corrected all their mistakes, what do they have to do? To improve that piece of writing, they just have to rewrite it. You told them how to fix it, right? And you can't even call them on, you didn't do anything else because they corrected what you gave them to correct. Whereas if you say something more general, like, I noticed that your verbs don't always agree with your nouns. Can you find an example where that is the case? Can you show me what we can do correctly? That at least gives them something specific in that piece of writing to look for. So then they have an idea of what they should do. It's good to identify errors or types of errors, but avoid correcting every single one. The tone. I think with adults, tone is hugely important. We want to make sure that we position our adult learners as having the power to make change, as being the agent, right? We want to choose things that cause them to think or to wonder more, either about what they've done or what they've left undone. Again, we'll get to some specific things, but you could ask questions like, what did you think about when you chose that topic? Or what were you trying to do? How did this help you do what it was you wanted to try to do? All right, let's see. So there are 4 categories of feedback: about the task, about the processing of the task, and about self-regulation. That's monitoring and controlling learner, and then about the self as a person. Most of what you will be doing as a tutor is offering the first 2 types of feedback. But sometimes our adult students need to hear techniques to keep themselves on track, the soft skills. For instance, a student who's habitually late to meet to you may actually need help understanding that in order to arrive at 10 o'clock when you've planned to meet, they have to leave their home with enough travel time to get there at 10, right? This may seem obvious to you, but it isn't always obvious to our students. Teaching students how to use a calendar to keep track of their appointments or the reminder app on their phone is sometimes a game changer for them. They also may need reassurance that just because they can't do something doesn't mean they are stupid. Some of our students have been told over and over so many times that they're dumb because they can't do this, that they believe they are dumb. We need to help them understand that they can learn, but they have to learn things in pieces. I had a really fascinating conversation once with somebody who said, I don't remember anything. And I said, oh, well, you know, I had to write down that we were having a meeting today at this time, because otherwise I would have forgotten that we had set this appointment. Really? Oh, yeah. I said, I write lots of things down so that I can remember them, because I can't remember them. And I don't know that anybody had ever said that to me, because he was like, well, I just have a bad memory. I said, I don't know. We have a lot of things we have to remember. I'm not sure that you have a bad memory just because you forget things. Um, so sometimes we have to take the time to do some of these other things that are not directly content related. So, um, because I wasn't sure if anybody would be able to bring work to share, it's hard to share work virtually. Um, I did find some for you. These are K through 12 examples because that's what the author was using. I have a few paragraphs that were written by former students of ours, which we might take a look at if we want to later. But I think these will give you a good sense of what we're looking at. So the prompt that these fourth graders were given was to describe what lunchtime is like for you on a school day. Be sure to tell about your lunchtime so that someone who has never had lunch with you on a school day can understand where you have lunch and what lunchtime is like. So the student wrote, my lunchtime is loud. Almost everybody in the lunchroom is making noise. We have very good food and nice cooks. We have 35 minutes to eat lunch. My lunchroom is big and has a lot of tables. We have milk and a salad bar for the teachers. That is what my lunchroom is about. What do you think? Did this student write a decent paragraph? Did they answer the prompt? Describe what lunchtime is like for you on a school day. Can you imagine what that lunchtime is like? I think it's not a bad paragraph. It's clear and it makes sense, right? So you might start with something like that. You wrote a paragraph. You've got 5 sentences, 6 sentences. That's a paragraph. The sentences are pretty complete. Maybe you could have added some more information, right? Maybe tell me more about the food. Do you like the food? Why do you say the cooks are nice? Maybe you ask about is is it noisy also because the lunchroom is big? So maybe we want to move the sentences around a little bit, right? And I would not choose everything to talk about with a student. I would pick one or two things, right? Depending on what are you working on with them. So that one is a fairly successful paragraph. Here's one that is less successful. And it's important that I tell you that this particular writer was typically a good writer. They typically wrote a lot more than what, 2 sentences. But this time they wrote, we have lunch at 1 p.m. here. It's really noisy. You can't think. We have lunch in the gym. And the first thing that I think of when I read this is it sounds like the author doesn't like lunch at all. Especially since I know the author likes to write, does a good job writing. This isn't really very good, right? The sentences are complete, but it's not a complete paragraph. If we first offer this, it seems like maybe you don't like lunch, then we're acknowledging what the writer has said. And then you could either suggest expanding the paragraph, or you could work on the concept of what a sentence is, depending on what the learner had previously written for you. So here is a rough draft that is quite fascinating. The students in an 8th grade learning support classroom were given the assignment of writing a persuasive essay. And this particular student wrote, "This is a rough draft. Mrs. So-and-so should get rid of her Toyota and buy a Dodge truck. These are my reasons. The Dodge truck has a lot more power, nicer body style, and a lot safer than a Toyota. It has the big 1500 and a Toyota has a V8. The Dodge has more power, nicer body style. Most people prefer the body style of a Dodge than a Toyota. I love my Dodge and all the room and storage. A Dodge is safer than a Toyota. Toyota had a recall on their gas pedals sticking and the airbags going off for no reasons. They could both cause a crash. All these facts are reasons that Dodge is a better truck than a Toyota. You would be making a big mistake if you picked Toyota over a Dodge. I hope that I changed Mrs. So-and-so's mind about Dodge. I hope I changed her mind for her own benefit." What do you think? Good paragraph, bad paragraph?
Good paragraph.
Why do you think that? Give me some reasons. I agree. I think it's a good paragraph. Why?
The writer gave examples.
Definitely. The writer gave examples. He knew that in order to persuade, he couldn't just say, "I like the Dodge. I like the Dodge better," right? He had to give reasons and he had to support his reasons, right? It isn't a perfect 2 paragraphs, right? There are lots of things that could be done to make it better, but acknowledging that he knows how to write a persuasive essay is going to be huge for this student, right? So I've seen different people take different approaches to correcting something like this. You could say, "I see X number of spelling mistakes. Can we find some spelling mistakes," right? You could say, "We have these conventions in English about what we capitalize and what we don't capitalize." And you could review the conventions, and then you could take maybe sentence by sentence and look at conventions. But as a whole piece of writing, it's pretty good. Certainly fulfilled the prompt. So here's an interesting 4th grade math problem, that one that I actually can understand. So that's why it's here. Jan's snack shop has 3 flavors of ice cream: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. The ice cream can be served in a dish, a sugar cone, or a regular cone. There are 9 people who choose one dip of ice cream in a dish, or in a sugar cone, or in a regular cone, and all of their choices are different. List or show the 9 different choices. Could another person have a choice that is different from one of these 9 choices? Why or why not? It's an interesting question, right? It doesn't necessarily require math. It requires sort of logic. And here's a high quality solution to this 4th grade math problem. And then I'm going to share with you what the feedback was for this. So this person listed 9 different choices, starting with vanilla and dish, vanilla and sugar cone, vanilla and regular cone. Then moving on to the chocolate, the dish, the sugar cone, the regular cone, and finishing up with strawberry, dish, sugar cone, and regular cone. And they answer the question about if there could be another different choice. And they said, no, there aren't any other choices. These are all the choices possible. If they ordered 2 scoops, or if they combined them, they could have had more choices. But with only 1 scoop, this was all the choices there were, right? So Feedback for this could be something like, this is a great solution. I noticed that your list of choices is in order. You did all the vanillas, all the chocolates, and all the strawberries together, and you listed the containers in the same order each time. That way you didn't miss any. And if we go back to that list of ways to think about feedback, it's focusing on the work and the process of getting the answer, right? It's compared to the correct answer. It's descriptive, it's positive, it's clear, it's specific, and it's supportive, right? And then the comments on this are that this comment affirms and describes achievement in terms of the criteria for the assignment. It notices and names for the student a strategy that will also be useful for other math problem solving. This supports learner self-efficacy. The learner had decided to use this strategy, and highlights a strategy that will be helpful for transfer. Note that the learner didn't need the teacher to explain that strategy. They already used it. What is affirming here is that the teacher noticed the learner's good work, right? So if we have the same problem with a solution that needs improvement, what might we be able to say about that? So this person has vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. So they've got that order, but they haven't kept the order of the how they're served. So they've gotten mixed up. Vanilla with a dish, chocolate with a sugar cone, strawberry with a regular cone, vanilla with a sugar cone, chocolate with a regular cone, strawberry with a dish. And then they didn't even answer the second choice because they couldn't even come up with 9 choices, right? So they just gave that a miss. So here's good feedback for this particular math solution. I noticed that you list the flavors in order, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, twice. Keeping the list organized is a good way to make sure you don't miss any. But there are 9 combinations and you found only 6. Can you figure out a way to organize both the flavors and the containers at the same time to get all 9? So in this comment, the teacher identifies the partial strategy the learner used, and that shows that the teacher notices that they had a strategy. And then the teacher points out that extending that strategy would yield a complete solution. So she asks the learner how to figure out how to rotate 2 lists at once. There's a good chance the learner can figure that out because they've already shown a partial understanding. However, if they couldn't figure it out, then the teacher could go on and show them how to do it. The other way that you might give feedback on this particular type of question is to say, you didn't answer the second part of the question. How would you know if you had all possible combinations? Or you didn't answer the second part of the question. When you list your combinations in order, you know you have all possible combinations. So both of these ask for reflection on the success of the solution. This is the problem-solving step the student didn't reach at all. The first alternative, asking the student to figure it out, would be preferable if the student had successfully figured out the strategy of listing all the elements in rotation from the previous comment. If not, the second alternative can be used to finish coaching on this point. So you're not telling them the answer, you're explaining how to get to the answer. So was anybody able to find work that they wanted to discuss with us? Or do you have any questions? It's been the most one-sided tutor talk I've ever given. Marco, you're muted. I see you now, but you're still muted.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm new here, so I participated mostly to just
To
observe.
see what it was.
I I have someone, but I haven't connected yet.
Yeah, I see that. I sort of checked on our website for everybody as I was waiting. I appreciate your coming, Marco. You're going to be working with an adult basics student.
I know nothing of the
You don't
student.
know anything. Okay.
I don't even know how I'm going to help them. I'm assuming it's going to be math related.
Yeah. Okay. It when we first make these matches, it's always a little bit, we're also not quite sure how they're going to come about, right? Is it going to work or is it not going to work? We know a certain amount about both parties, right? Some of the students we know a lot more about, and some tutors we know more about, and we do our best to make a good match. Hopefully that will turn out to be the case for you. Anybody else? Evelyn, you've got an ABE student, is that right?
I have a student with great intellectual challenges.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that we will get to the point of her being able to write much.
Right.
And so I was listening to your talk and thinking, hmm.
It's hard.
Uh-huh.
It I want to thank you for being willing to give it a shot to help someone with intellectual issues. It's challenging. And I'm not trained in that field myself. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable giving you any specific direction as to how to do that. Um, I think focusing in probably on small incremental changes is probably the best way for many students like that. That doesn't mean it's the right way for her. We
Right.
do have someone on staff, maybe even a couple of people who are trained in working with people with different abilities to learn. And Anita can put you in touch with them or give you some information if that comes to be something that you'd like.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll talk to Anita tomorrow and mention um, that how long have you been meeting with your student?
Basically, I think a month and a half.
Okay. All right. So maybe, yeah, I'll talk to Anita and give her some suggestions.
Okay,
There are a couple of people on staff who may be able to help you. Yeah.
that would be good.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, this is Paula.
Hi, Paula.
Hi. I have students who are just beginners at English.
Uh-huh.
They're very yeah, they're
Yeah.
beginners for sure. And so they certainly can't do writing of
No,
paragraphs.
no.
I mean they're working at speaking in sentences and at basic vocabulary. So I'm
Yes.
not sure how to apply this kind of feedback in that
So
situation.
some of this, right. So a lot of what I was talking about was not so much for English language learners at that level. But what I have seen happen sometimes at that level is tutors want to correct every mistake that a new speaker makes,
Yeah,
which then causes them to stop talking,
yeah.
right? So for you, that would be my biggest caution, right? Use language they understand, keep it simple, and don't overcorrect, right?
Right. Yes.
Beyond that, at this point, you're right. They're just trying to learn enough to get by. Are you
Right.
meeting with them in person, Paula?
Oh, yes, we did. We
Okay,
did
good.
one session on Zoom, and it was really, we all agreed that really, it was not very helpful. So
No, it's
person still,
very, very hard.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I just sat in with 2 AmeriCorps members this week, starting online classes with low-level students. And they're both highly discouraged.
oh,
Um, and I understand completely why. I think it will get better, but it is much, much harder to teach low-level speakers virtually
yeah,
than it
oh,
is.
yes, it's much more enjoyable in person too.
Absolutely.
They're delightful people, and so,
Yes.
it's really fun to be with them.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
So I'm glad that you can do that. Um, you know, as and I think the other thing to say is when we're learning speech and when you're helping them learn to speak in English, it's not it's not harmful to consider how children learn speaking, right? Because adults go through many of the same stages in speaking that children do. They just have a lot more knowledge in their head.
yeah.
They know how their language works, and English may or may not work the same way, but they're going to be comparing it. At least most people are.
Yes, they do constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, you know, they will pick things up. It amazes me what people pick up without being explicitly told this
Mhm.
is how to do it, right? But it takes time.
Yes, I tell them that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Thank you for doing that.
my pleasure.
Janet, can you tell me what your last name is just for my records?
Sure, sorry, Loudon,
Okay, I wondered if
Loudon.
it was loud. Okay, and you're in the North Hills too, right?
Yes,
And you're meeting in person with ELL students?
we're about 50-50.
50-50. You're
Yes,
so
we
when you
usually
say that, do you mean some of you are there and some of you are not
no,
there?
no. We
Thank
usually meet
goodness.
once a week in person and once on Zoom.
Okay. And what level are your students?
I believe they're advanced or high
Okay.
intermediate.
Yeah. So you may be doing more writing with them, and you will
Yes,
see some things that are not that dissimilar from the writing paragraphs I showed you, right?
yes.
They're sort of they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
And,
it's funny that when we're on Zoom and because we're in standout 5 and it
right,
actually asks them to write quite a
right,
bit. Um, when we're in person, I'll say, okay, in English, write in English. But I can see that previous lessons we did on Zoom, they wrote in their language sometimes, and I can't blame them. I'm sure I would have that impulse too.
right.
Um, yeah, like no cheating. No, we're here for English.
It's really hard. What I would say that you could pass on to them, Janet, is that even writing a little bit in English every day, simple sentences, is going to over time improve their writing, their fluency in writing. I gave this assignment to a student who was at that level, maybe a little higher. She went off on a summer vacation, and I said, just every day, write a few sentences about what you saw or what you did or what you think. And when she left, she was writing 2 or 3 sentences. When she came back, she was writing half a page.
Yes, another useful thing has been just chatty emails.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and that's true for all levels of students, right? Teaching them how to send emails on, you know, on anything is really useful. Teaching them how to use their phone for things that they didn't know phones could be used for can be really great. I also wanted to say the same student who has these issues with math was not reading and writing very extensively. She wasn't very interested. She would do the reading that they did together in their sessions, and that was kind of that. And she admitted that she wrote poetry at home, but that was just for fun. And I said to the tutor, she said, I can't get her to write a paragraph. I said, well, what are you having her write about? She said, well, whatever it says, they're using Journey to Success, which is a different book than Standout, but whatever it says to write. I said, well, why don't you ask her what she would like to read and write about? And she called me after Christmas and she said, I want you to know, I assigned her to write a paragraph about a cat. And she came back and asked if she could write 5 paragraphs. So if you can find the thing that motivates your student, it can unlock doors. So just sort of one more piece for you. Anybody have any other questions for me? Then I'm going to thank you for your time tonight. Know that you can get in touch with me. My email is lmorse@literacypittsburgh.org. I'm on our website if you want to look me up. I'm the Pittsburgh East Coordinator. Evelyn, I'll talk to Anita and she'll get back to you.
All right, thank you very much.
And thank you all so much for your time tonight. Have a good evening.
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.